I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man, that is
On this
that
sad
is a
clown.
sad clown.
Proud of my address.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3 Omaha packs, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
I think you hit it on the head. This is a great honor for people, and you may be the first person that said that, but I mean, it is quite the honor.
It's truly an honor to be here. So thank you for having me. I'm excited that tens of people are likely to hear the wisdom that we'll be sharing today.
Well, we'll start off. So on this episode of The Gloom, we've got a special guest here with us today. You would recognize him as former Site-Q at the Octagon. I think I know just participating in his workouts and just listening to his COT as he shares about his life. I know I'm inspired by this guy here. So we've got Ice-T on The Gloom with us today. So Ice-T, tell us how else. Who aged you, and what was the first workout like, and how'd you get the name Ice-T?
Yeah. So first off, again, thank you for having me. Great to be here with you. I first heard about F3 probably years ago, living in DC, and there's this talk about like this men's Christian workout group, and it wasn't relevant. It wasn't anybody directly communicating with me, so heard about it, never thought about it again. I returned to Omaha, moved my wife and kids. We came here in November of 19. In February 2020, ran into Safe Ride at a kid's birthday party. It was like, "Oh man, welcome back in town. I do this workout thing. You should join." I was like, "Oh, sounds great. When do you do it? 5:30 in the morning?" "Oh, see, I don't get up that early." And so continued on, and pandemic hit, and so everyone went inside. Was able to be at an outdoor event in August of 2020 and ran into Icy Hot. And we're talking, he's like, "Oh man, I just started doing this men's workout group. Like, it's awesome. You should try it." I was like, "Is that the one at 5:30? Yeah, I don't get up that early." And so actually my wife had started working out with some of the wives of F3 guys and was really liking it. And then it was getting cold and the pandemic was heating up again. And I was starting to really miss human interactions, starting sliding towards depression. And, talking about it with my wife, I'm like, this sucks. We don't get to see anybody. And she's like, "I think you should try it. I think you'd really like it." And so it's like, all right, I'll try this. So sent Safe Ride a message and was like, "Hey, I think I'm going to try it." And so posted to the Octagon for the first time in November of 2020. So that's how it came about. A couple different guys tried bringing me out, and it took pandemic and near depression to get me out. So happy that it did.
What do you remember from that first workout? Anything stick out to you?
Yes, positivity. That is like the number one thing that really caught me off guard. I was like, all right, this is going to be a bunch of guys around my age, which is about you, right? Most of us are between 30 and 50. I was like, there's going to be guys giving people crap and just that. And it was like, "Hey, come on, doing great." What? Where am I? And so it was really taken aback, and it still sometimes shocks me at how positive and supportive we are as a group. Now, guys who have become close friends can start to razz each other a little bit. And so that's a normal part of being guys. But the culture created within F3 Omaha has been really spectacular, and having that positive, supportive aspect that I think really catches folks off guard.
I love that. And I think you're right. I remember the same experience of like, this feels different. This is not your
Yeah,
typical kind of men's group. You're expecting people to be macho, and there's really not much.
I
exactly.
was like initially a little put off because I just assumed that these people have to be a little fake, right? This has to be some type of facade. They want me to keep coming to this, so they're just being nice to me for that reason. And then you realize, I mean, that's just not the case. But I remember my initial thought being, "Oh man, this is too good to be true," kind of.
Yep, totally agree.
So, how did you get the name IC then? So, where's the
Yeah.
first workout? How the name come about?
So, very briefly, my life stories. Grew up, born and raised in Omaha. Went to college out in South Bend, Indiana, where my roommates were from Zimbabwe, California, and Florida. And then moved back to Omaha, same neighborhood. It was like, man, the world's really big. I want to go see it for a little while. So moved out to Washington, D.C. Thought it'd be for 2 or 3 years, ended up being 12 and a half. Met my wife, got married, had 2 kids, bought a house in Virginia. And then her father had terminal cancer. And so it was bad. And so we thought, you know what, we don't want to keep driving up every weekend. Let's be there, like get as much time with him as we can. And so sold our house in Virginia, moved up to New York on Long Island, and we thought we'd get 2 or 3 months with him. We got 9 months before he passed, and then spent a year and a half figuring out where to live. Living near family is really helpful, as we were coming to find out. And so her being from Long Island, me being from Omaha, really difficult to decide between them. Ultimately, ended up moving to Omaha. And so I told that story at the first workout and talked about kind of how we'd moved around. And someone heard Long Island and he yelled out, "Iced tea." And I think it was Folsom was on cue and said something like, "Yeah, I like 90s rappers. All right, iced tea." So that's how it came around. I was like, you know what? It's not the worst nickname. I'm okay with it. I know some guys have to like warm up to it. I was pretty good with mine from the start.
That's awesome. I love that. It would be Folsom, right? The 90s. So I guess you weren't a morning guy, but were you working out before, or what was your fitness level like before you started?
Yeah, I've generally stayed in pretty good shape. Usually it's been running on my own outside, headphones. Ran a few 10-milers. And so would do some races and would oscillate, more in the summer, less in the winter, like with most guys doing it on their own. And I was running outside here, and it just like the motivation, oscillates. It goes up and down. And so I have loved having this group as motivation, right? It's as a number of guys have talked about on this podcast. Like I get up when it sucks to wake up. It's like, well, but so-and-so's going to be there. I talk to, I like to see this group at this location on this day. And I like getting into that comfort zone and knowing this person always puts a smile on my face. I do want to take care of myself, but at this point it's like, I get to see friends for like 45 minutes every day. Like that happened in college, right? But that doesn't happen very much in real life, especially parents with kids. See friends every couple months. And so the fact that we get to spend time together, conversing, short snippets or longer on a run, is really a fantastic way to get camaraderie in, male fellowship. That's really where I am and what drives me these days.
Well, that's great. And you had mentioned, talking to Safe Ride and Icy Hot. I guess, did you kind of come in having some connections, so it was a little bit easier for you to, I guess, have that accountability and see those guys and want to show up for them, or where were you at?
Yeah, I had lived away more or less for 20 years. And so when we moved to New York, I had said to my wife, like, hey, yes, you'll probably have some high school friends there, but I don't want to just like become friends with your high school friends' husbands, right? Like, let's make us a couple friends. Let's meet new people. We think we've got a good marriage going. So like, let's find people who match us, who we are today, not who you were 20 years ago. And so that was pretty successful. And when we moved to Omaha, she said the same thing to me. And so it was like, yes, we'll retain those old friendships that I had from grade school, high school. But also we'll be in a different part of town and like, let's make us friends. And so in February 2020, we're like, all right, this spring, man, we're going to meet lots of new people. We're making friends. We're going to have like drinks in the backyard and hanging out, and bam, COVID just slammed that door shut. And so we really had to be, and because we've moved around, we had to be really intentional about making friendships. You know, it'd be meeting someone and taking that extra awkward step of saying, I really enjoyed meeting you. Can I have your phone number? Not exactly something I've been saying in the last 15 years, you know, since I've been with my so that is a little bit of a hard step. And I think guys often don't get over that. But it's necessary. I mean, that's what leads to friendships. That leads to interesting conversations. That leads to higher engagement and, frankly, ultimately a happier life.
I like that approach. I'm curious if have you found that awkward conversation easier to have with guys in F3 since you're kind of already breaking the barrier with monkey humpers or some, you know, what's been your experience with F3 guys?
Exactly. So yes, mostly. I think that most guys are more friendly. And so thus more open to that conversation. I still find it a little bit, you know, it still feels weird. But just acknowledging that it feels a little bit weird is important. I've thought about it, you know, would it make sense to have a directory that anyone could look anybody up? And yeah, right now that you're getting into privacy issues and we're storing people's PII, the plague, I'm sure you're like, no, I know all about HIPAA rules. Right. So no, we're not going to dive into that. But Slack is a fantastic way to do it, right? I mean, that's easy to send somebody a direct message, and it's super comfortable, and it's F3 focused, and so that's a way to make contact. You also know that you're going to run into these guys again, generally speaking, right? And so you don't have to say, I might never run into you again, so let's get in touch. It's, well, I'll probably see you next week, same day, same time. So it's nice that there's a couple different ways to engage. And yeah, it lessens the awkwardness a little bit, but there's still some awkwardness there.
Well, I remember when I joined too that, you know, I get this sense that there's pockets of friend groups that were already established. So I was coming into something that, you know, they already had their subset of friends. And so I'm like, well, this is going to be very difficult. But like you're saying, as you continue to come, you get more opportunities to see those guys and engage with them. That kind of goes away. But I just remember that initial feeling, kind of feeling that, you know, these guys are already kind of set up, and how am I going to, you know, make my way in without being intrusive? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you're the new guy on the block, right? Unless you come in knowing a few people, it is awkward, and like, hey guys, can I be friends with you? Like, that feels uncomfortable. And so I think that's the beauty and some of the brilliant, you know, unintentional brilliance of F3. Like, no, we're here for a workout, right? So you can be like, all right, I'm here to work out. I don't have to talk to anybody. And then you turn around and you're like, oh man, I made some great friends. Right?
I love that. And it is, you know, even with like the shield lock, you know, you talk about that. Like, if you want to, you know, like have a shield lock, there's still that awkward, like, and I've had a few guys, I feel like, like Roll Bar or somebody's was giving them a hard time saying like they have, like they have like almost like sister wives or something, right? Where they're like this other group. But curious if, some of the things like cafeteria or even like Q source, some of those things, because you mentioned like there's this point where you want to see if you align right with the guy's maybe views or beliefs or at least some of the things that you have going on in life. So have you found opportunity there with coffee and Q source maybe just to have those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, cafeteria is such a wonderful component. All right, and I mean, people have talked about it, but it's really kind of the secret sauce of why is F3 Omaha growing like crazy, and why is F3 Omaha so successful? Other places, F3 has been around a lot longer, but haven't seen nearly the engagement. And I think that's it. Like having coffee after every workout, where you're just talking and you're just with somebody, and you get to sit and chat. It can be a little tough, conversing during workouts when you're counting in cadence or you're rotating or you're switching off and right, you're on a grinder, but you're off kilter with somebody else's group. And so like, you're like, oh, hey, bye. They run by. You can't have that, deeper, longer conversation about, tell me about yourself. Who are you? What's worrying you these days? What's interesting you? So yeah, I think the socializing aspects are fantastic. The challenge, of course, at least as I see it, is I'm also an engaged father of two, and I want to be home to take care of them and wake them up and get them up and off to school and help out around the house and do that. So I want to be present for my family, but I also want to hang out. I enjoy the camaraderie. So it's a balance. And so some days I do and some days I don't. But finding what works for us and being clear and having a conversation with my M was important, to where I like really dove in at the beginning. And she was like, could you like pull back a little bit? Yes, I should. If you're seeing a problem, then I'm not doing this right.
I'm curious on how you've kind of reconciled some of those things that you're talking about. You want to be an engaged father, and I've gone through something recently very similar, having my own kid, and my wife, my M, asked me, hey, well, she was going back to work from her leave, and she was very upset, and I was trying to console her, and I was like, what's the problem? You're fine. You're going to see him. She's like, then she asked me, how many hours a day do you get to see your son? And I said, well, now that I think about it, probably only like 4 hours a day. And that was when I was working out all the time. And so the way I adjusted was I just cut out my workouts. I mean, the post just decreased. I made that decision. Hey, I want to be there in the morning. He's only awake 4 hours of the day. So that's what I want to do. Yeah. I mean, so hearing you talk about that, I'm interested to see, did you, Plague uses an A block sometimes. He talks about the concentrica. He has his value system. Is there anything that you and your M went through, or was it just more of an open discussion between you guys to kind of prioritize what you were doing to find that balance?
Yeah. So we don't have anything formal. I'll say that our marriage path has taken some turns, and early on we discovered our way of fighting, and it ended up being really good that we could talk about it and acknowledge this is our pattern and this is how we work, which was something would come up and we each overheat and kind of yell or strongly state our position or tear the other person's comments down and get worked up and then separate in a huff. And then like 20-30 minutes later, come back and be like, hey, sorry, here's what I was thinking. I understand where you're coming from. And then have like a reconciliation. And so we established that way of arguing. Good. And then in the decision on where to live after when we were in Long Island, we went through a lot of hard times in marriage counseling. to help us understand how to talk about this. And that got us really deep, to where we said, here's what matters to me. Here's what counts. Here's what's important. And I want to always be honest with you. And so I hear what you're saying, and that is less important to me than this. And to have those really hard conversations. And so as we've gone through sort of each of those phases, I think we've strengthened to the point where we can call each other out. We can say, hey, I trust you so much that I can say, you're doing this poorly. And so we're in a place, at least, where we're pretty comfortable having that conversation.
Wow, that's a great example, and I love just the, kind of the stigma of like counseling is such a good resource. Like more of us should be in it. I think that's, my wife and I had some breakthroughs in counseling, and you sometimes just need a third party to, even just the normal stuff. Like, how do we disagree and productively? It's
Exactly. Yeah.
You mentioned something, and I just wanted to touch on this because I think, I know you as a very outgoing guy, and I think a lot of guys are drawn to you as a leader. But you mentioned like the questions you would ask a guy. So I'm just curious where this comes from, because you mentioned like there's no time to ask a guy what's worrying him or what he's interested in. Where do you think that comes from? Because I don't know. I don't know. I think that's cool that that's like what you're wanting to know about people. But where do you get that from?
I was having a conversation with somebody one day, and it was like, and they said they hate the question, what do you do? And because that was always my opener, right? Like simple, what do you do? And so I actually do like that question, because it speaks a lot about a person, but I can accept their idea that it's not a great question, because sometimes how you respond shows your bias or dislike towards what they do, right? Or dismissal of them. And so I like asking questions that are a little off, like what do you do when you're not working out at 5:30, right? Like, and so that can open it up, and run into new guys and ask them that question. They're like, do you mean like, where do I work? I was like, however you want to take it. I don't care. Like, I'm just jogging from point to point, and I figured it's better to fill the air than to be silent, right? Like just start using words and I'll listen, right? I don't care what you say. But it's a way to open up to, where are you? What do you want to talk about? Like, what has fascinated you recently? Like, I love ideas. I love talking about interesting concepts, paradoxes, confusing stuff. And so I like opening it up to what's the coolest thing you learned in the last 10 years? It's just like, oh, I don't know. And the conversation goes usually in a weird direction. That's fun.
Well, I do like that, and especially there's kind of this level of anonymity, right? At F3, we don't all really know what each other does for work, but it gives you a chance to get to know somebody outside of their job. Like, I love that. Just what are you interested in, and it forces the guy to, like, if you don't have an answer to that, maybe there's some. I saw Pony kind of tilt his head when he thought, what's the most fascinating thing you've learned in the last 10 years? So I love that. Tell me, I want to get your thoughts. So you've kind of talked through your fitness journey and some of the idea around fellowship, but I want to get your thoughts on the third S, so on faith. So just share with us your experience there, kind of what where you've been, and maybe how F3 helps to support guys in their faith.
Yeah, I've been on a faith journey, as all of us are, and so mine goes back. I was raised Catholic here in Omaha, am Catholic. Went to Notre Dame for undergrad, and went deep, like learned a lot, talked, into the wee hours of the morning about principles of the church. I mean, like really nerdy, arcane kinds of conversations, but really thought deeply about faith there, and had a couple of courses that really challenged me around philosophy and theology and how they interact and where it's come from, where different ideas have originated. And so the meandering path of, the why are we here question. So went very deep on that. After college, remained a fairly regular mess attender, and then got to know people who did not believe or were of different faiths. My wife's not Catholic, and so we have some interesting conversations there. But ultimately, it kind of having that deep base has helped me branch out and think broadly. And so at this point, I'm most interested in things that expand my concept of faith, God, religiosity. And a friend shared a book on Buddhism with me. Thich Nhat Hanh is a modern, I think still alive, maybe not. You can fact check after this. But great Buddhist monk who writes about being present and how we are all of the same spirit, and he probably wouldn't use those words, but like life and death are simply two sides of the same coin, and a cloud does not go away, it simply becomes something different once it rains. And so exploring these concepts that I did not ever know about art, it's been really interesting. And how do I merge that with the concept within Christianity of a single God, and then the question of, is there a right or wrong way to live? And so I can go way down the road on these, which is why I like to stop talking to say, hey, tell me what's interesting you.
That's that. I can identify with just a mind that's always, and it's just out of curiosity, right? There's so much out there, and there's so many different ways that people have lived, and are living, and I think we're, it's a miss to be right next to those people and not find out. So I love getting to find that out. But,
well, and you're also talking to a guy in Plague that attends like 3 Bible study groups for all different churches. Is part of 2 different Lutheran churches, and I've gone to a non-denominational church. I think he does have some curiosity. I just will attest to that statement. Yeah. Do you feel like, on your experiences here with F3, that we do a good job of kind of progressing any of that, or we have an open enough environment where you feel comfortable sharing these things? How does F3 kind of help or not help?
Yeah. I wonder about that a little bit. I think obviously, like, we're in Omaha, it's going to be a predominantly Christian experience. That's who most people in Omaha are. We say open to all faiths. I bet if somebody came and went to a few workouts, they'd say, doesn't feel super welcoming. So I try to be intentional about that. By saying God, you are not saying Yahweh, you are not saying Allah, you are not saying others, right? And so just the words that you use indicate a bias towards something. So I love actually the concept of Sky-Q. That's nobody's word, right? That does not align to anything. And if you want that to mean whatever your orientation is, that's your alliance. So that I like the Sky-Q idea. I like the verbalizing of prayers and intentions. It's generally a way to share worries and share what's on your heart in a brief snippet of time, and be open about that. I mean, so I enjoy and appreciate those features of it, and the core concept of it, just like thinking beyond yourself, in terms of service, talking about caring for community, and that I love that part and wish I could get engaged more. Young kids make it a little bit tough, but in terms of the third F, I think the engagement, community, and supporting others is fantastic.
I think just kind of combining a few things that you said, I was at a workout this morning and we said, anybody have any prayers? And of course it was quiet. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, well, Paramount's having a baby tomorrow. And it's kind of like, yeah, that's exciting. But you almost wonder should we change that question, right? Should it be like, anybody have anything they're celebrating or anything they're anxious about, or, because those are ultimately the things we're hoping guys would say.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting, maybe I'll try that the next time I queue, see if I get any more, because ultimately it's just like, share what's on your heart, on your mind, that we could be encouraging or thinking about you.
Yeah, prayers can be of thanksgiving, not just intentions and asking. Right?
Yeah, I am curious. I feel like at one point you had mentioned your family was maybe were fostering some other families or helping to just kind of encourage guys to get involved with that. And I think you've done a lot in that space, in my mind, from a third F perspective. I don't know if you would share about that.
Yeah. So it was a year ago that, Afghanistan, the U.S. military pulled out of Afghanistan. And I think a lot of us were, like, policy and politics aside, right? It was sad to see, like, all these people horrified at what's going to happen because they had partnered with Americans for so long and no longer had that protection and safe environment. And so as thousands were fleeing and becoming refugees, we said, how can we help, right? How can we support? And something like 800 Afghans were resettled to Omaha in one wave. And so we said, what can we do to help? And so got in touch with the Refugee Empowerment Center, and were assigned to a family. And so went through like a 2-hour training that basically says, be kind and don't ask about their past. If they volunteer it, that's theirs to share. But like, you don't become a refugee through fun means, right? It's pretty terrible. And so there was more to it than that, but ultimately that's what I took away. And so we helped a family of 4, mother, father, and 2 teenage boys, resettle here in the state of Nebraska. So we did end up raising funds. The parents who worked in healthcare there were here working in a wire factory, and they had to take Ubers or taxis 45 minutes each way to get there. And sometimes the rides didn't show up and they got disciplined at work. And I was like, we can help solve this, right? I can't change the world. I can't, make better, international policy that can allow for refugees not to need to flee their countries, right? That's beyond my control. But I can help raise money to buy this family a car so that they can be mobile, they can get to work, they can have trustworthy transportation. And so we did that. We bought them a washing machine, right? Like a few things that just get them through. They are now in good shape. I mean, they're settled in, they have found community, they have jobs, the kids are in school. That's great. And a few years from now, the hope is that they have learned English. If they could get back into the healthcare industry, like, that'd be amazing, right? We need healthcare workers. Like, there's this huge shortage, and there's these 2 wonderful people here that can help, but they can't speak English or couldn't at the time when I saw them last. And then there's a few other barriers. So let's get people who can help with our staffing crises.
That's phenomenal. And what's so interesting to me being in healthcare is sometimes the care in other countries is better than it is here. And do you find like workers that are more compassionate, and so it's interesting how like different degrees transfer or don't transfer over these things that are such a high need. So did you interact much with the family, or like how often were you seeing them on a regular basis, and you didn't bring them to F3, so I'm curious.
So they ended up finding some people who had been from their town that live in Lincoln, and so met him a couple of times. The father spoke a couple words of English, and so did not have the chance to EH him much. So one of my bigger failings in that undertaking.
Kudos to you for taking that on. I think that's just a cool way, and that's something that you just decided to do, on your own. So I'm really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
What as you're thinking about your F3, right? We're trying to reinvigorate male community leadership, and so trying to teach guys how to be better, husbands, fathers, leaders, community members. Tell us about your experience as a Site-Q, and kind of how are we doing at growing or teaching leadership skills to guys?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. A decentralized model is not going to have strong instructions and guidance on here's all the stuff you have to do, right? I mean, that is the starfish model, right? Like, oh, you got this, run with it, right? A few guiding principles and then you got it. So I appreciate that there is so much flexibility and freedom in it. That can be seen negatively as, well, there's not enough structure. Well, that's by design. And I think that's a good thing. And I think most of us embrace that and say, great, I'll make it what I want it to be. And then I'll hand it off to the next guy to make it what he wants to be. So I guess I'm saying there's not a lot of guidance on becoming a Site-Q. It's like, oh, hey, here's this spreadsheet. Now you have to make sure that there's somebody lined up to queue your workouts for the next year. So, oh, okay, yeah, like that makes sense that would be a responsibility. And that's about it. Beyond that, like there is freedom to choose how deep or shallow you engage. So I think it's the right level. There are resources, right? There's tons of guys who have been through it or are going through it with you. And so if you want to think through and talk through how could I do this better or differently, or make things more interesting, there's a lot of resources, right? And we're all here to help. We're here to talk about it. We enjoy it, right? I mean, that's why we put this time in. And so you can just reach out and say, hey, I've got these questions, and somebody will be there to coach, guide, advise, and be there to help you work through it, right? No one should feel like they're on their own, but you do have the freedom to choose your own path.
I guess with that being said, whenever you took over the reins, you obviously come to this position, you're like, wow, there really isn't a lot here, right? There is not a lot of instruction. Here's the spreadsheet. I'll reach out to some guys. Was there something on your mind whenever you took over, like, hey, this is something I really would like to see change, or what I would like to see happen under my stewardship?
Yes. In particular, I had a guy who was working on him for a while, finally got him out to a Saturday workout. It was fun. Like, there was a game of some sort. So we got a workout in, but it was also kind of silly and camaraderie in that. And then went to a Monday workout, and it was like just an ass kicker, right? Like just everyone's dragging by the end. And this new guy got really sore because there were coupons there and there were like really hard workouts. And so he was so sore he never came back. And I man, he could really use it too. And so I tried to make the Octagon the welcomingest AO, which is not a word. I acknowledge that, but it's just the spirit of it. It's a little bit silly, but also friendly. And so I want anyone to feel that you can come, because again, we say it's open to all men, but like there's a certain threshold. If you can't jog, there's not much there for you, right? And so how can we make our workouts really, truly more open to guys who need it, right? I mean, those of us who have been in good shape, yes, right, we benefit and we enjoy it like crazy, but we're already at a certain fitness level. How do we? I'm most inspired by those guys who come in not at that fitness level and say, wow, I like this camaraderie, and I see how I can use this group to better myself in the fitness respect. So I think that kind of entryway is tough to find, and not every site is going to be that. So try to make the Octagon that. And happily, in terms of the transition to handing off the shovel flag to Golden Pike, he's a great example of that. He came in and talks about it regularly, and has made a transformation in himself, and is an inspiration to say, yeah, he keep pushing, keep getting better. And so I'm happy to have him take those reins and carry that idea forward.
I love that. And you've also got, Plague on the other line here, who is adamant that they need to be the biggest ball busters on the planet, these workouts.
And F3 is big enough to accommodate both, right?
I think one thing that, I think we may be missing as a group is really advocating modifying. I know we say it in a disclaimer, but who's really stepping back and hanging with the six and modifying with them, right? I didn't do a great job of that when I was leading the woodshed. And I don't do it now, admittedly. When I see a guy struggling, I'm just worried about myself and pressing forward.
Yeah.
So I don't know, just something to consider, I think, as we're having this conversation.
Yeah, it is hard. And a group needs both, right? Like we need someone pushing what's possible here. How hard can you go? What are new innovative ways to do this and still have that welcoming path? So both are important.
Yeah, just a quick call out. Mufasa now has more workouts more burpees in his workouts than I do. So but I do think one of the cool things about the Octagon in particular is up until the Octagon, all of our other Monday sites were MRFs. Mm-hmm. And so what you're saying is exactly in line with kind of the purpose of that site, right? It's like not everybody wants to do a MRF, and most guys, when you say, oh, we're going to do a MRF on Monday, they're like, if they haven't been working out or they don't know what that is, they're like, I'm out, And then I've had a few guys where, like, if they hear you're doing that on Monday, they're kind of like, what are you doing on Tuesday through Saturday, Right. Yeah. So I love that. And I think, actually, coming up September 12th, Patton and Mulligan are launching a site, a non-MRF site out at Red Wings, and they are going to intentionally focus on making sure there are defined modifications. Because to your point, Pony, we say modify as necessary, but not everybody knows how to do that, And so I love what you're saying there.
That's awesome.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, can't talk about the Octagon without acknowledging Bloodshot, and that being exactly right. The spirit with which he started it was, let's make this open to other people. So I have to give full credit to him for leading that spirit.
For sure. Tell us, any sort of like advice or encouragement for, Site-Qs or F&Gs or just the packs in general. Just kind of curious over the years what you've learned that you might share.
Yeah. I was thinking about that a lot. And I think the number one thing is when there's a new guy, make sure to talk to him, right? Find him. And that first workout, let him see that this is a friendly group. And, Bonnie, I think you said like oh, there's all these guys that have their cliques and their friends already. Yes, that's true, because we enjoy spending time together and we see each other 5-6 days a week. So like that happens, and that's okay. But the way to keep someone coming back is to say, hey, you're part of us, right? Engage them with conversation and break away and say, hey, I don't know you, but I'm going to partner with you. Because whoever brought them out has done their job in my eyes, right? It's the rest of us, Site-Q in particular, whose responsibility is to keep them coming out. And so that, I think, is the role that we all play as, okay, FNG, this is our chance, right? This could be an awesome guy. Let's see if we can get to know him and let him feel that, the positive spirit that we've developed here.
I love that. And we do. I mean, we need every guy. Every guy that's out there has something unique to offer. I'm amazed at the guys that show up kind of out of nowhere, and they're just amazing men, amazing leaders. And we're just getting to meet them for the first time, and they've been doing all sorts of cool stuff. So I love that advice. What about, so Pony's favorite question, your most favorite and least favorite exercise is what makes that list for you?
I really, as with many, despise hydraulic squats. My knees are not good. So yeah, I still hate them. Favorite, I think, are anything in the genre of makes you giggle a little bit, right? Goofballs, monkey humpers, pickle pushers. Like, these are just things you can't not smile about, right? You're doing this and you're like, God, am I really doing this next to all these guys, in the middle of the night sometimes? Like, this is just silly. And bringing that silliness, it just livens up life. There was a recent workout where the Q just like totally botched it. And I don't want to call him out by name. But like, we were all so confused. You were there, Blake, right? It was so confusing, but I haven't laughed that hard in a long time. It was the best second F workout I've had. And so like, that's great, right? I've been to plenty of not memorable workouts. I won't forget that one for a long time. And so I may slip in next time I cue like some really complicated, confusing instructions, having guys going, what the hell? Right? Just so that there can be that silliness, that lively spirit. And if that makes, me the butt of the joke, fine, right? Happy to play that role in that moment.
That was awesome. And the best part was you get to see everybody's personality come out, right? The type A people were like, wait a minute, what,
Yeah.
out. And then, you've got Slow Pitch and Tater that are just, giving people a hard time. And I agree. I left that workout thinking that was some of the most fun we've had in a long time. And it, you can think as the cue, like, that you botched it, but really that's what we're all there for.
Yep. You're moving, you're doing it right. Honey Stinger taught me that one early on. Like, if you're moving, you're doing it right. Just keep moving.
Well, and that element is so important because, we talk a lot about this false bravado that a lot of guys come in with when they're coming to work out, right? Like you said, Hey, we are a workout group, and we're tough. We're, it's a workout, but how tough are you when you're doing monkey humpers with a bunch of other guys, right?
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you answering that question. As I said earlier, that one's a dud, but Blake reviews the data and says that there's demand for it, so we're bringing it back. Well, kind of in the same vein of how you like to ask questions that are hopefully open-ended and can spur some conversation, one of the questions we like to kind of end with is words of encouragement. Where are you at? How are you feeling? What can we be doing for you?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm in this moment in a really good place. Work-wise, family-wise, community-wise. Life is very good for me right now. It isn't always, but in this moment it is. And so my request would be to act, do something, right? It's a little controversial, but my take is that praying is the least thing that you can do. And so if somebody needs help, right? Sit down with them. Or I feel bad about homelessness or food insecurity, go to a food pantry or go serve meals. Find a way to act. And so that's my, I guess, request is for folks to take action and be that change in the world that you want to see. Sometimes there's nothing you can do. And I fully understand that. And at that point, prayer is probably the most appropriate thing. But donating, volunteering, acting, that is where you can have a tangible impact and see the change. So that's probably how I would answer.
I love that. I think that's good. That's a good call to action. And maybe when you see us out there, you can ask us what we're doing.
Can't wait.
Yeah, I like that. Cool. Well, thanks for your time today, Ice-T. This has been phenomenal. And just thanks for being vulnerable and sharing your story. I think guys will identify with your journey, and hopefully when they see it, they'll at least pick up on asking, what are you interested in or what's worrying you? So we'll take us out in Namarama. I'll start us off here.
All right.
Brandon Fleharty, 36, The Plague.
The Plague.
I'm John Whitworth, 31, Pony Express.
Express. And I am Brian Adams, 40, Ice-T.
Ice-T.
T.
Nice.
Thank you, brother.
Hey, thank you guys.
Yeah. Hey, have a good rest of your day. Appreciate it.